I came for him, but she looked at me like I belonged with her. I remember the moment I stepped through the front door of my friend's house. It was the kind of ordinary evening, soft golden light spilling from the living room, the faint scent of home-cooked food drifting from the kitchen. But somehow, the air felt charged, subtly different. I came to hang out, to catch up with my friend, maybe laugh over old jokes, but there was something in the way the space seemed alive that made me pause. And then I saw her, not at first with intent, but as a flicker at the corner of my eye, my friend's mom moving through the room with a quiet, effortless grace. She wasn't loud or flamboyant, but there was a presence about her that pulled attention naturally. The kind of presence you notice without realizing it. A gentle sway in her step, the soft clink of jewelry that marked her movement, the way her shoulders relaxed yet carried a quiet authority. She smiled at someone across the room, and for just a moment, our eyes met. I felt a jolt, not of shock exactly, but of recognition, like seeing a color I'd only glimpsed in passing. She tilted her head, ever so slightly, a hint of amusement in her expression, and then turned away, leaving a subtle echo of warmth behind. It was almost disorienting. I come to see my friend, to reconnect over shared stories and laughter, and yet here was someone who quietly commanded my attention without asking for it. Her presence was subtle, the kind that creeps into your awareness gradually. Her perfume, faint but lingering, a soft blend of something floral and warm, like late afternoon sunlight filtered through curtains. I noticed how she moved through the room, offering a hand to carry plates, laughing softly at jokes I didn't entirely catch, yet feeling every bit as real as if her attention had landed on me alone. I reminded myself she was my friend's mom. That should be enough to ground me, to keep my thoughts in check. But there was something disarming in the way she looked at people, the quiet confidence behind her eyes, the softness of her gestures that made them feel intimate even in a room full of people. When she passed by me in the hallway, our hands brushed lightly as she reached for a serving bowl, and for a fleeting second, the warmth of her touch lingered, leaving a curious tingle. I caught myself analyzing, feeling both guilty and mesmerized. How could someone move so naturally, effortlessly, and make an entire space feel warmer just by existing in it? Every laugh, every tilt of her head, every slight shift in posture carried layers of personality, strength, kindness, confidence, and something else I couldn't yet name. The evening stretched on, but I couldn't shake the pull of her presence. I had come to see my friend, to be just another guest in his home, yet somehow the world narrowed, subtly, around her. And in that narrowing, I realized something dangerous. I was aware of her in a way I wasn't aware of anyone else, and I was both terrified and thrilled by it. That was the first spark, small and almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. I didn't know then that it would grow, that it would challenge boundaries I thought were set in stone. All I knew was that I couldn't take my eyes off her, and that maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to. The evening had settled into a comfortable rhythm, laughter echoing softly through the house, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen mingling with music playing faintly in the background. I had been joking with my friend near the couch, recounting a story from college, when she appeared again, almost by chance, in the same room. Or maybe it wasn't chance at all. I would later realize that these small moments seemed almost orchestrated by fate, each one pulling me deeper into her orbit. She was in the kitchen, arranging snacks on a tray, and I followed instinctively, pretending to offer help. Our hands met briefly as I reached for a bowl at the same time, a soft, accidental brush that left a warmth lingering on my skin. The sensation was fleeting, but it made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. She smiled at me, not a flirtatious smile, not even a knowing one, just warm, grounded, and real, but it was enough to make me suddenly hyper-aware of every detail about her. The curve of her fingers, the soft fall of her hair over her shoulder, the quiet way her eyes crinkled when she laughed. "You're helping, or just making things more complicated?" She teased gently, handing me the bowl. Her voice was soft, melodic, and there was a subtle playfulness in it that made me want to linger to say something clever, but I found myself tongue-tied. I realized then how easy it was to forget the room full of people around us. Her presence had a gravitational pull, gentle yet insistent. Every glance she gave, every small gesture, the way she leaned slightly closer to pass a plate, the way she rested her hand lightly on the counter as she spoke, felt intimate, like unspoken invitations into a quiet corner of her world. There were moments later, too, that felt almost designed to disarm me. In the living room, I reached for a magazine at the same time as her. Our fingers brushed again, this time deliberately longer, though subtle enough that no one else would notice. My heart stuttered, a quiet jolt of awareness running through me, and I caught myself staring at her for a heartbeat too long before looking away. She didn't pull back. Instead, she offered a soft, knowing smile, as if silently acknowledging the tension simmering between us. Even mundane interactions, the passing of a plate, the handoff of a glass, a casual touch on the arm while laughing at a joke, carried a weight I hadn't anticipated. Each moment was small, almost negligible in isolation, yet together they built an undercurrent of connection that was impossible to ignore. By the time I found my seat again, my thoughts were scattered, oscillating between guilt and fascination. I was here for my friend, yet I couldn't deny the pull of her presence. She was confident, graceful, effortlessly kind, and somehow aware of the subtle impact she had on me. I was drawn to it, though I tried and failed to resist. It was intoxicating. The tension wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in the brush of hands, the soft laughter, the way her eyes lingered a second longer than necessary. And as I realized I was beginning to notice these details constantly, I understood that what had started as curiosity was slowly becoming something far more complicated, something I couldn't easily name or control. By the end of the evening, I knew one thing for certain. Accidental encounters weren't accidental at all. They were deliberate sparks, quiet, restrained, and mesmerizing, setting the stage for something I wasn't yet ready to fully understand, but couldn't stop wanting. Later that evening, the crowd had thinned. The background chatter faded into the soft hum of the house settling down, and the golden lamplight cast everything in a calm, intimate glow. I found myself wandering toward the living room, and she was already there, perched on the edge of the couch with a book in her hand, though she wasn't reading. Instead, she seemed present, fully present, as if the world had narrowed to just this quiet space. Our eyes met briefly, and she offered a small, almost imperceptible smile, inviting me without saying a word. I sat down across from her, and for the first time that night, there was no pretense, no laughter masking tension. The room felt suspended in soft warmth, the kind that encourages honesty, where voices can lower and hearts can speak without words. We started talking casually about nothing really, but gradually the conversation deepened. Childhood memories came up, small regrets, little fears we each held close. She shared a story about a lesson she'd learned in her 20s, and I listened, mesmerized, not just by her words but by the gentle cadence of her voice. There was a quiet confidence behind every sentence, paired with a vulnerability she didn't try to hide. It made her real, human, astonishingly accessible, yet somehow still out of reach. At one point, our knees brushed beneath the couch. The contact was minimal, almost accidental, yet it sent a jolt of awareness straight through me. I felt my pulse quicken, the warmth spreading from my chest to my fingertips. She didn't pull away, didn't flinch, but the subtle tension between us thickened the air. I realized then that the attraction wasn't about overt gestures. It was in the pauses, the space between words, the way we noticed each other. I caught myself studying her without intending to, the slight tilt of her head, the way her hair fell over her shoulder, the softness of her gaze as she considered something I'd said. And I noticed, too, the way she seemed attuned to my reactions, how her expression shifted slightly when I laughed, when I hesitated, when I lingered on a thought. It wasn't flirtation in the conventional sense. It was connection, deep, subtle, and charged with the unspoken. There was a moment when she leaned forward, adjusting the book in her lap, and the faint brush of her fingers against mine as she set it down was enough to make my breath catch. The warmth of her hand lingered, a quiet imprint of her presence that made me painfully aware of the space between us. Time seemed to stretch, measured not in minutes, but in the rhythm of our shared silences, the rise and fall of our voices, the accidental touches that felt deliberate in their effect. Every glance, every small movement, every quiet laugh built a tension I wasn't yet ready to confront, and yet I didn't want to. By the end of that conversation, the room had transformed in my mind. It was no longer just a living room. It was a cocoon of possibility, charged with a quiet intimacy that neither of us dared name aloud. The unspoken moments had done their work. I felt drawn to her, tethered in a way that was exhilarating, frightening, and utterly irresistible. And I knew, with a certainty I couldn't shake, that this was only the beginning. The evening had quieted further, the laughter from earlier replaced by the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. We found ourselves in the kitchen again, alone this time. It wasn't planned, I knew that, but somehow it felt inevitable. She leaned against the counter, her posture casual yet commanding, and I noticed the subtle way the lamplight caught the highlights in her hair. There was an intimacy in the simplicity of the scene. Two people, alone in the same space, and yet neither entirely knowing how to navigate the invisible tension between them. We spoke lightly at first, about mundane things, groceries, a new recipe, but there was an undercurrent to her voice, a softness that hinted at something deeper. I was aware of every inflection, every pause, every glance. And then it happened. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes locking with mine, and said, softly, almost teasingly, "You came for him, but you look like you belong with me." For a moment, I froze. The words weren't loud, they weren't shouted, but they carried a weight that seemed to fill the entire kitchen. My chest tightened, my mind scrambling to reconcile surprise, guilt, and something else I couldn't name. Her tone was playful on the surface, but there was a quiet confidence beneath it, a certainty that left no room for easy denial. I wanted to laugh, to brush it off as a joke, but the subtle warmth in her gaze held me in place. She wasn't teasing to provoke me. She was stating a truth she had recognized in me, in us, in the tiny moments we had shared. And the truth was undeniable. I felt it too, though I hadn't admitted it, even to myself. The air between us seemed charged, almost tactile. I could feel the residual warmth of her hand on the counter from moments ago, the subtle closeness of our bodies across the small space, and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. It was intimate, yet entirely non-sexual. It was about awareness, acknowledgement, the weight of unspoken attraction finally given a voice. I noticed small details I hadn't before. The curve of her smile when she said it, the soft tilt of her chin, the way her eyes searched mine, almost daring me to respond. My own pulse thudded in response, making my ears feel warm, my fingers twitching as though they wanted to reach out but couldn't quite. The world seemed to narrow around her, the soft hum of the house fading, leaving only the electricity of this moment. And yet, there was restraint, a careful tension in the air. She didn't step closer, didn't touch me. Not yet, but her words had done their work. The acknowledgement of attraction, of possibility, had shifted something fundamental between us. I realized suddenly that the rest of the evening, the rest of the visits, would never be the same. There was a line drawn, invisible yet unmistakable, and we both knew it. I swallowed hard, aware of the tremor in my chest, and offered a small, uncertain smile. She returned it, softer this time, as if reassuring me that it was okay to feel it, okay to acknowledge it. The statement hung between us like a spark waiting to ignite something much larger, something dangerous, thrilling, and utterly irresistible. For the first time that night, I wasn't just aware of her presence. I was aware of us, of what might be possible if we dared to step closer, and the thought both terrified and exhilarated me. After she left the kitchen, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the quiet house, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the distant ticking of a clock filling the empty spaces. The words she had spoken earlier, "You came for him, but you look like you belong with me," replayed in my mind like a melody I couldn't escape. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, my fingers tracing the textured wallpaper, and tried to make sense of my own reactions. I felt guilty first. Guilty for even entertaining the thought that my friend's mother could feel this way. Guilty for noticing her the way I did, for feeling drawn to her despite every social and moral boundary. I chastised myself, tried to push the feelings aside, but they clung stubbornly, persistent and undeniable. Every step I took, every glance I stole toward the living room where she had been moments ago, reminded me that this attraction was not fleeting. It was anchored in something deeper, more human, more real. And yet, alongside guilt, there was an undeniable thrill. I replayed the accidental touches, the brush of her fingers on mine, the warmth that lingered longer than expected, and the quiet moments when our eyes locked. Each memory, small and seemingly inconsequential, now carried a weight that tugged insistently in my chest. I realized with both fear and fascination that this wasn't about lust or fleeting curiosity. It was about connection. A connection that shouldn't exist, perhaps, but undeniably did. I found a chair in the corner of the room and sank into it, resting my elbows on my knees. My mind wandered, circling around every detail I had noticed tonight: the subtle sway of her hair, the warmth of her smile, the calm assurance in her voice. I remembered the gentle curve of her fingers brushing mine in the kitchen, the way her eyes had searched mine with quiet certainty. Every detail seemed magnified, electric, almost painfully vivid. I questioned myself constantly. What was I feeling? Was it just admiration, misplaced affection, or something more profound? The more I examined it, the more I realized I couldn't deny the depth of it. It was terrifying because it crossed lines I had sworn I wouldn't even approach. And yet, it was exhilarating because it was honest, raw, and unfiltered in a way that made me feel alive, even vulnerable. I replayed her words in my mind again, this time listening not for their shock, but for their meaning. She had seen me, truly seen me, in a way no one else had that night. And I had seen her, her humor, her grace, her quiet confidence, and the tiny vulnerabilities she didn't advertise to the world. That recognition, that mutual awareness, was far more intoxicating than any physical touch could be. By the time I left the corner chair, I understood something critical. The hesitation, the guilt, the questioning. It wasn't going to disappear. But it didn't need to. This slow burn, this internal conflict was part of the journey. And for the first time that night, I felt a fragile sense of clarity. I wanted to see where this connection could go, despite the risks, despite the boundaries. I stepped back into the living room, heart still thrumming, mind still spinning, and realized that the evening had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer just a guest here. I was a participant in something unspoken, something delicate, something that demanded patience, attention, and courage. And I wasn't sure I was ready, but I couldn't stop myself from wanting it either. The days that followed were strange in their quiet intensity. Every visit, every accidental meeting, seemed charged with an unspoken awareness between us. It wasn't about words. It was about the space that existed just beneath the surface, a current neither of us could or wanted to ignore. One evening, I found myself again in the living room, ostensibly helping my friend with some trivial task, but really, I was waiting for her to appear. And she did. She walked in, barefoot on the soft carpet, hair loosely tied, carrying a mug of tea. There was a casualness to her movements, but beneath it lay a quiet confidence that made the room feel smaller, warmer, more alive. Her eyes found mine almost instantly, and there was a fleeting moment of hesitation, a pause that seemed to stretch, pregnant with intention. We settled into the couch across from each other, and the silence between us was not empty. It was heavy with meaning. She offered me the tea, and our fingers brushed as I took the cup. The touch was brief, almost accidental, yet it lingered in my mind, in my chest, like a whisper of permission. I realized then that we were speaking without speaking, communicating in glances, in the brush of hands, in the subtle shifts of posture that conveyed far more than words could. "Are you thinking too much again?" she asked, her voice soft, teasing, yet careful. It wasn't a reprimand, just an observation. Her gaze was steady, inviting honesty. I smiled, realizing that she had read me better than anyone else had that night. We talked, yes, but the conversation was secondary to the quiet understanding unfolding between us. A shared joke would send us both laughing quietly, our eyes lingering just a fraction too long, as if measuring the distance between us. A simple touch, her hand resting lightly near mine on the couch arm, sent a shiver through me, making me acutely aware of the warmth of her skin, the soft strength in her fingers, the quiet reassurance in her presence. I noticed that she, too, had moments of vulnerability. The flicker of uncertainty in her eyes when she considered something deeply personal. The faint exhale when she let herself relax just slightly in my presence. These glimpses were fleeting but profound, giving me the sense that our connection was mutual, that this pull between us was acknowledged, even if unspoken. There was no rush, no dramatic confession, no overt gestures. Just the quiet rhythm of shared glances, subtle touches, and an unspoken understanding that we were both aware of the depth developing between us. The tension was no longer awkward. It was natural, woven into the fabric of our interactions like a gentle current guiding us forward. By the end of the evening, I realized something remarkable. The mutual understanding we shared was more powerful than any words could capture. We had acknowledged, in our own ways, that the connection existed and that we were willing to explore it cautiously. The slow burn was no longer just a spark. It was becoming a steady flame, bright enough to illuminate our emotions, yet soft enough to be savored, unhurried, and meaningful. As I left that night, her eyes met mine one last time, holding mine a fraction longer than necessary, and I felt it, the promise of something real, something patient, something that could endure. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt or hesitation. I felt anticipation. We understood each other now, fully, quietly, and irrevocably, and it was intoxicating. The evening had settled into a serene quiet. Outside, the faint rustle of leaves whispered against the windows, and the distant hum of passing cars reminded me that the world was still moving, even as this small bubble of time held us suspended. I found myself back in the living room, where she was already there, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked beneath her. The soft glow of the lamp lit her features, highlighting the gentle curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, and the subtle grace in the way she leaned back, completely at ease. We didn't speak at first. The silence between us was comfortable, filled with the kind of familiarity that only comes from shared awareness, shared understanding. Our glances met frequently, lingering just long enough to communicate what words could not. The room seemed smaller, cozier, the air between us alive with unspoken acknowledgement. I settled beside her, careful of the space, yet close enough that our shoulders brushed lightly. The contact was minimal, but it carried a weight I could feel in my chest. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let the moment linger, a quiet reassurance that this connection, delicate and profound, was mutual. I became aware of her subtle movements, the way her fingers toyed with the edge of her sleeve, the slight shift of her body toward mine, the softness of her voice as she finally spoke. "I'm glad you stayed," she said, her words simple, yet layered with meaning. Her eyes searched mine, gentle and inviting. I smiled, feeling the tension in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a warm, steady comfort. "Me too," I whispered, realizing how much truth was packed into that small reply. Our hands met then, naturally without ceremony. The warmth of her skin seeped into mine, grounding me in a way nothing else had. Her fingers intertwined with mine, tentative at first, then with increasing certainty, as if we were both finally allowing ourselves to admit what had been quietly growing between us all along. The moment was tender, YouTube safe, yet electric, filled with the intimacy of mutual understanding rather than overt romance. We leaned slightly toward each other, sharing small smiles, the kind that speak volumes in silence. A gentle laugh escaped her when I tried to say something clever, and I felt my chest tighten again, not from desire, but from the joy of being seen, truly seen, by someone I cared for deeply. Every glance, every brush of fingers, every shared breath was a promise. Patience, understanding, and a connection that would endure beyond this single night. Time seemed to stretch. The world outside faded to a distant murmur as we sat together, shoulders brushing, fingers entwined, hearts quietly acknowledging a bond neither of us had dared to name aloud until now. There was no rush, no urgency, only the gentle confirmation that the slow burn had arrived at a warm, steady flame. As I left later that night, her hand lingered in mine for just a moment longer, a silent goodbye filled with promise. Our eyes met, holding a wealth of unspoken words, of mutual respect, and of an affection that had grown naturally, deeply, over time. I walked out into the cool night air with a heart lighter than it had been in weeks, filled with anticipation and gratitude for what had been quietly, beautifully built. We had crossed boundaries carefully, navigated hesitation, and allowed desire and respect to coexist. And in that quiet, lingering moment, I knew this was just the beginning of something tender, patient, and profoundly human.